another tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk about how to add fragments dynamically at runtime and also respond to the user interactions, right? So actually the motivation of the video is I'm going to talk about dynamic fragments. In my previous lectures we talked about static fragments. Pretty much you add your fragments statically using the layout, right? So now we will be talking more about adding dynamic fragments at runtime. So we can achieve, how can we achieve this? We can achieve this by adding a view group as a container for fragment, and then adding, or you can add or replace or remove the fragment from the view group. So you just create a view group, and the idea, okay, what is the concept? The concept and idea now of creating dynamic fragments is you have a view group as a container, and then you keep on dynamically add and remove or replace the fragment in the view group. Okay, so this is the concept. So this technique is more flexible, as the fragments can be active until there is no longer needed, and then removed when it is needed, and instead of always being inflated in the XML log. So in statically you have to always inflate the fragment, and it is always being displayed in your XML layout. So dynamically adding fragments will make it more flexible with working with your fragments, right? So for example, if you have more than one fragments, then you don't need to just statically define these fragments. Okay, you just instead you can use a dynamic approach of replacing or adding new fragments, or removing new like old fragments and adding or replacing with the new fragment, right? So this is the concept. So so depending on your app requirements, you can use static fragments, okay, which one is working better, or you can use a dynamic fragment, which is also so you have to choose these different solutions on the basis of your app requirements. So in this concept, we are this tutorial we are gonna talk about adding fragments dynamically to our activity. So let's not waste the time, and let's go right to the code. Okay, so this is my code, and okay, we will be talking about okay, this is my code. Okay, let me run the application. Okay, I'm just pretty much running my application, checking if my build is working fine. Okay, yeah, it's pretty working fine, and this is my application. We will be reusing the same application, this star sign application, and then we will be pretty much using using a dynamic adding a dynamic fragment approach to recreate the same application that we created before. Okay, so first we let me land to my this dynamic subfolder where I created dynamic demo activity. I have to also define my activity in the manifest. 100 manifest. I have to okay, let me create dynamic. Okay, let's remove this, because now my dynamic demo activity will be a launcher activity, right? Export it to false, no, true. And yeah, pretty much I'm gonna close this. Okay, so we have this dynamic demo activity. Let me launch this activity, and it will be pretty empty for the moment because there is nothing. So now we will be trying to add this already existing fragments that we created in our previous lecture, which is detail fragment and the list fragment, right? Okay, So how can we dynamically add these two fragments, detail fragment and list fragment, in our this newly created dynamic activity? I mean activity uh, that I'm trying to demo. Is first thing is we have to go to our Gradle. Then we need to add the necessary dependencies. What is the necessary dependency is the necessary dependency that you need actually is like we need to use a fragment container view, like as a container view group where we can pretty much add and remove the fragments, right? So first let me add those dependencies. Fragment dependencies is let me implementation of Android X dot fragment ktx, yeah. Let me implement this one, let me sync it, and let me go to my demo activity. This is my demo fragment, and here I will be pretty much using a fragment container view instead of a constraint layout. Okay, so this is the main motivation. The first thing is we have to do that. And what's next? So we have to pretty much, we are actually dynamically adding detail fragment and list fragment from actually it is already, I have created this in my previous lecture, so you just can copy and paste it from the previous lecture. Okay, so I have already created a detail fragment, list fragment, pretty much taking from the previous tutorial. And then we have to go to our main activity. I mean like this dynamic, not this demo activity but dynamic demo activity. Then we have to pretty much add and remove the fragment dynamically, right? So how can we do that is we have to check if saved instance state equals to null. So nothing, no instance is saved. Then we have to find the container view. So we have a fragment container view, right? Is a okay, let me see if I have actually I didn't do any. Okay, this is a fragment container, and so we get the our fragment container and container view. Then what we have to do, we have to have a list fragment, right? The list fragment, so we use our support fragment manager to pretty much add our fragment, okay, dynamically. And this is how we do it: add our fragment, view id and list fragment commit. Okay, so this is how we get the reference to our fragment container view. And then we create a new list called list fragment, and sorry, we create a new fragment called list fragment, and then add the fragment to the fragment container view with the id of the fragment container, right? So this was what we do. So the fragment is pretty much added there. So let me run, I mean let me apply it, see if it's working. So I'm dynamically pretty much adding a fragment. So I have to rebuild my application again. Let's hope it's working. I don't see it's working. Why? Okay, I know it. Why? Because I'm importing a wrong fragment. I have to import the dual fragment, right? So let me apply it again. Yes, we have a crash, and we will see what's the crash for. Okay, so actually we have to implement the star sign click listener. Yeah, this was the missing part. So we have to also implement our star sign click listener, and for that we have to create our interface called star sign click listener. Okay, pretty much we have a on click int, and then we have to implement it and overwrite, right? Okay, so we have to do it to do. Okay, let me run the application again. Okay, still I'm getting problems. Let's see what's the problem. Most simply, star sign click listener. Okay, actually the main problem is the star sign click listener is of the click listener of dual plane demo activity. Okay, so actually let me try to not create a new one but implement the already existing one, and trying to override the listener. Okay, so actually in my previous tutorial I have already created a listener, star sign click listener, so that's what I had to implement. Okay, so now it's pretty working fine. So on click is not working, so we will be doing that, but the rest is working pretty fine. So we were successfully able to add a fragment dynamically to our activity. Okay, so which is the container is a fragment container view. So this is our first step, like we were successfully able to add our first list fragment. And then what next? We run our application and we were able to see that our fragment was added, right? So now also we also need to do the similar task also for our detail fragment. So let me see where is my detail fragment. Yeah, so we have we will be reusing our detail fragment and adding the similar, because right now the click is not doing anything, right? So we have to also implement this click. But the interesting thing is for the click, for detail fragment actually it needs the star sign, like the first important thing that it needs is a star sign. Okay, so otherwise you cannot you don't know which view to get updated, which one, which sign you have to create the details. So for that we also have to do put int we have to put star sign id and star sign. So we have to make some modification here. Okay, let me so here we have to have a star sign. Okay, we have to not only use this one, but we have to use a similar way of creating an instance, but not with the parameters but with the star sign id. And star sign id should be passed with this star sign id parameter. We don't need this one. And let's put int, sorry guys. Okay, so yeah, we have the similar manner we have created a new instance for creating a instance of a detailed fragment by passing the star sign id. So this is what we why we did in this code. And so this is also a way of how to pass the arguments when you are creating dynamically the fragments. Okay, so I will try to demonstrate how we create pass the arguments when we create the fragment. So actually the arguments of a fragment are stored pretty much in the bundle, as you know that. So the same way that the activity use also extras, which is also a bundle, and extras are pretty much like a key value pair, as you know that. So yeah, in this for our case it was a star sign id as a key, and this star sign id was a value. The value was passed pretty much every time when the new instance was created, right? When you create a new instance on view created actually, so you have to pretty much modify the view here, and create on view created. So whenever the view was created, we set star sign, and star sign id is a is the star sign id value that we get here is from the arguments int sign id, otherwise we get the default value of 0. Okay, so whenever your fragment is created on with this new instance, then this when it reaches to this callback of on view created, then you will set the star sign sign data and update the view. Okay, whenever you click, you have to go to that fragment called detail fragment and then update the view passing the star sign id, right? And yeah, this is the logic. So okay, so we are ready to go to do also that. And yeah, let's do that. For doing that, we have to do a slight modification. We have to implement the unselected, means like we have to perform here the selection, like it's when each item is clicked, this on click is being called, right? So we have to create our modification here. So find view by id is a fragment container view. We will be pretty much replacing our fragment with the dynamically the new fragment. So the fragment of a detail. So it's a similar process. It's pretty simple. It's a fragment container view, and uh, is like a detail fragment, fragment new instance. We pass the star sign id is the id of what we get from the callback, and we use the support fragment manager begin transaction and replace the fragment is we replace the layout with the new layout, right? So we have to replace the layout. When we replace, what we need is we need so we have to replace using okay, let me go to this actually it's a main container view dot id, and then we have to pass the detail fragment, right? And yeah, there is a simple slight thing that you have to understand is like you have to add backstack to backstack null, and finally you have to commit. Okay, actually so there is some slight things that I have to make you understand is like first thing is replace. What is replace? Replace, like you see, it has multiple implementation. So you have to pass the container view id. So container view id is this container view, like fragment container view, or like let's container view that we are passing, right? And you pass the id of this container view where you are replacing, and you pass the fragment. If you just check out, you pass the fragment that you want to replace with. And the second thing is you have to add to backstack. Okay, this add to backstack is actually you pass null so that the app does not exit when the back button is pressed. So so for to avoid this, you add the backstack to null, so you don't add any backstacks, because if you press back, then it will, if you add the backstack, then if you press back, it will go back to the back to the to exit button instead of going back to the list fragment, right? So this is because actually we are adding everything in the same fragment. And finally we commit, and this is how it works. So let me run this application and let's see if it is working. Yeah, we were able to launch an Aquarius, you see. And if you press back, you go back, you don't go back and exit the application, you know, because we have not clicked the added our backstack. So this is a simple trick. It's a note not to make your app exit, okay, on back button. So this is the simple trick. And yeah guys, I think we are pretty much fine, and it was some kind of a cool solution compared to your previous other solutions using the static fragment, right? And it was pretty much working fine, I think. So yeah guys, this is a simple way of how to create dynamic fragments, how to add fragments dynamically to your activity, right? So thank you guys, and catch you up in the next lecture.